welcome back. The second topic of today is what I covered very briefly in the first lesson, was that of what's called abdominal bracing. Now, abdominal bracing is the movement pattern whereby you contract your core in a way that increases what's known as intra-abdominal pressure, and it also provides huge support for your entire core when you're going to do any sort of activity. Now, it's extremely important. There's been some great research to show that just by working on abdominal bracing without doing anything else, just the process of doing abdominal bracing actually increases core strength and core thickness, which is all beneficial for having a really functional core. So what I want to do now is show you a couple of different ways of training abdominal bracing. And I find that standing is not always the best way, and ultimately we want to do it while standing, but I think like anything, when you're learning something new, there's a couple of little techniques that you can use that will make it easier for you to engage your core in the right way and develop the right motor patterns so that you can hold your core appropriately when you finally do stand up and start jumping around. Now, in this section, I want to cover off two things. I want to talk about one of the two techniques that I mentioned for improving abdominal bracing, and I then want to spend a bit of time talking about intra-abdominal pressure. Now, at the end of this session, I've provided you with some written instructions on the two techniques that you can use to improve your intra-abdominal pressure through abdominal bracing. But feel free to join in whilst I'm going through one of the techniques, which is to practice the technique whilst you're kneeling. Now, in the literature, there's two modes of sort of core preparation that have been used or are discussed around being able to do leading up to doing some form of exercise. The first one's what's known as abdominal hollowing. Now, this is a bit of an outdated technique, and it was actually quite popular with bodybuilders a couple of generations ago. It was really just a form of sucking your stomach in as far as you can, obviously not as much as shown in this image here, but it was about contracting your stomach, sucking it inwards, and that they believed helped in preparation for core stability. Recent research kind of shows now that it destabilises the lumbar spine, is not particularly useful exercise. The second technique is that of what's called abdominal bracing, and that's what I want to spend the time on today. So abdominal bracing is aimed at trying to increase what's known as intra-abdominal pressure. Now, this is an absolutely key principle and technique and strength that you need to develop through your core if you want to get a really highly functional core with any activity that you wish to do. So what is intra-abdominal pressure? So imagine your core really is a cylinder and it's surrounded by a whole bunch of muscles. Now, if you're able to contract those muscles extremely hard and compress the space inside your torso, your core, the more you press in, the more pressure is pushed out, and that generates a high level of pressure and stability through that particular region. Now, an example I like to use is to use the good old-fashioned party balloon. Now, if we look at this end of the party balloon and we imagine that you've got really poor core stability and in particular intra-abdominal pressure, that's a bit like having this part of the balloon here where it's just unable to provide any level of support and it gives way and it bends really easy and it's just rubbish. That's what happens if your core is not particularly strong. You just have no level of support. But if we look at this end of the balloon, which has now got a high level of pressure inside, you see it's now actually quite stiff and fully able to support itself. This is the equivalent of what's going on in the actual torso. So we want to develop intra-abdominal pressure using the abdominal bracing technique. So what does that look like? So I find one of the easiest ways of teaching abdominal bracing is to do it from a kneeling position. So what you want to do, the key muscle that's involved in abdominal bracing is the external obliques. You will also get your transverse abdominis switched on, but the external oblique is the easiest one for you to be able to feel that you're doing things right. So how I get people to do this exercise is I get them to put their hands on their external obliques, which are their side abdominal muscles. What I then have them do is I then have them try and contract their abdominals with the goal of trying to slowly bring your belly button towards your spine. So you're not sucking in towards your spine, you're trying to contract in and try and sort of force your belly button towards your spine is the contraction you need. Now, if you do that well, two things will happen. One is you will start to feel your core start to flatten out. 2, you'll also feel your external obliques will start to activate, and you'll actually feel the muscles on the side here start to go hard. Now, if you can't do that, and I have a number of clients that just when we started had no idea how about going to switch their obliques on and create this abdominal bracing technique, get them to cough. And what that does is your external obliques and internal obliques are actively involved in the process of coughing, and so that will actually have them being able to go, that's what my oblique being switched on feels like. You then obviously want to get them to the point where they are able to create an abdominal brace, switch their obliques on, and not have to go through the coughing process. The other thing I would suggest in terms of teaching people the best way of developing intra-abdominal pressure through your abdominal bracing is also to get your clients to hold their breath in the early stages. Now, why is that important? If I take a breath in, I force my diaphragm down, and it's just another pressure that helps to increase the intra-abdominal pressure through this torso region. So you take a breath in, then you do your abdominal brace. That's a way of being able to maximise intra-abdominal pressure through your torso, which is the key to developing high levels of stability when you're about to do some sort of activity such as lifting an external load, bending over, or placing some sort of load that potentially could put your lumbar spine at risk. So again, in summary, what you want to try and do is you want to try and learn how to abdominally brace through your core. You want to make sure you switch on your external obliques in particular, and you do that by putting your hand on there and making sure that those muscles go hard as you're creating that tension and pressure through your mid-torso prior to going and doing some particular activity. So the other way that you can practice your abdominal bracing is in a horizontal position, either laying on your back or laying on your stomach. So I just wanted to kind of show you those techniques now. So the first one is just a simple kind of crunch position really to start with. So knees bent, feet flat on the floor. And all I want you to do here now is I want you to think about doing your abdominal brace, and you're not squeezing your butt, you're just thinking about abdominal bracing, contracting your obliques and slowly pushing your belly button or contracting your belly button to the floor. And what you should feel is you should feel your lower back start to move towards the floor if you do this exercise correctly. So you contract your obliques, try and move your belly button to the floor, and you may not get all the way to the floor, that's not important, it's just that you feel that your lower back is starting to move towards the floor. That's the movement that you want. So that's with your knees bent. And then if you straighten your legs out, we now engage the hip flexors a little more. That's going to pull on this lower back and make the arch potential a little higher. I get you to repeat that exercise. So again, contract your obliques. Now you have to do this a little harder this time, or you have to have a better oblique contraction to be able to offset this slight anterior pelvic tilt that you've generated having your legs straight. So you contract your obliques, try and get your lower back as close to the floor as you possibly can. And that in itself is an excellent exercise for training the core, but it also starts to teach you how to switch these obliques on in the appropriate way for abdominal bracing. Then what we can do is we can then do the similar exercise, but on your front this time. So you can do it two different ways. We're going to do a plank, but I'm going to do it kneeling. And so from this position here, all I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to contract my obliques. I'm going to try and push my lower back, or can move my sort of belly button towards my spine and my spine towards the ceiling. And then I'm going to relax the position and then repeat again. And I can also do it on my toes. So again, contracting the obliques, trying to think about belly button to my spine, and then relax. So there's a few techniques that you can use to improve that abdominal brace, because that's the key abdominal stability position and technique that you want to learn, because that's what leads to the best pelvic stabilisation when you're going to perform any activity that you want to do.